Yo, the Hashira Half Hour is putting the slayers back in your ears, fighting to erase all of your demon fears. This is your MC, B.S. Wizzle, the Grass Hashira on the mic today. Date by yo, you fool! No, I'm just kidding. But we are bringing Demon Slayer back for a special episode of a Demon Slayer What If? I've got my trusty partner, Hannah, with me.
You know what, Brian? We're about to talk about a pretty intense subject, so thank you for opening up with a little rap to make us laugh, because I feel like the jokes are going to be not much in this episode, so thank you. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your girl, Hannah, and I am just emotionally prepared to maybe cry during this episode.
As well, do we have Hannah, who is ready for her once, or I guess weekly, if you will, reminiscence of this scene. We will go ahead and actually introduce our esteemed guest, returning to the show, Noah Glose. Welcome back. We are so glad to have you with us again. Just in case you need an update on his content, he has been living his JoJo's Bizarre Fantasy lately, and also really expanding into food reviews. I see you go to some restaurants every once in a while, too, so we love some good variety.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm so happy to be back on, and especially talking about Demon Slayer again. I feel like this is going to be such a fresh conversation because this kind of moment hasn't really been talked about, fully fleshed out, so I'm really excited to talk about this. And yeah, with this Demon Slayer hiatus, I kind of may have watched like all of JoJo's and up until season 6 or part 6 as of right now.
Meanwhile, I'm over here rewatching.
You know what, you have to give yourself credit, though. You've gotten through, even though it's been attached to Hanae-san, I am proud of your variety, because you did what? Case Study of Vanitas, you did Yamada-kun at level 999, so I do give you credit where it's due.
Nier Automata, I did just finish that. I am working through Vinland Saga right now, too, so we're branching out, but
We love to see it.
Respect.
Alright, well, without further ado, this question, let's get to chatting. Now, we're going to ask a hypothetical here, and we'll discuss it throughout the rest of the show. But going for it, what if Nezuko died instead of surviving the sunlight during the Swordsmith Village arc?
Yeah, so this question alone, I feel like brings about a lot of truth, because in a sense, this could have easily happened. So it is really, really nice and fresh to kind of talk about that, to see that different perspective, because what I got from it, and I know you guys will definitely add on to it, is how I started with it is that I feel like the tonal shift for Tanjiro could definitely be a little bit different than how we can see it for us manga readers or anime onlys coming up. I feel like if this truly happened, where she was the last Kamado sibling to be unalived in front of Tanjiro, it would take a turn in Tanjiro that could potentially lead into his vulnerability being in question. I feel like his vulnerability could be tested a lot within how far he can go, and especially with who would influence him. Especially, I feel like it would definitely be a different view, and I'm curious to see how you guys thought of this to start.
Yeah, just opening up like with some opening thoughts on all of that. So obviously, as the big Tanjiro stan, I spent a lot of time thinking about exactly what it would mean for him specifically, more than just the story as a whole. And obviously the story is really about him and Nezuko, so anything that happens between the two of them would affect the story. But I think that it's kind of an interesting hypothetical thought, because when I think of Tanjiro, I think of someone who, maybe it's my biggest gripe with the show, whenever he experiences something extremely traumatic, he has moments of emotions regarding it, but he kind of seems to move on from it very quickly. And I've always seen that as he lives, breathes, and eats, sleeps. Everything that he does is to protect Nezuko. So I go back and forth between this idea of him kind of eventually getting to the point where he's pretty much the Tanjiro that we know, or never really getting to that point again. I don't think he would go like Giyu 2.0 and just be sad and depressed and not talk to people. I think that'd be a little bit way out of character for him. But when you think about the fact that when it comes to Nezuko, he his whole life is revolved around that. Not only is she the thing that he can hold on to because she is family, he can still have those happy moments with her that bring him back to the time that his whole family was alive, but also he has that goal of turning her back into a human, and he has the desire to protect her. He's got all these things working together that, in my opinion, is one of the reasons why we don't really see him like have this like trauma response. We don't see him have like nightmares after Mugen Train. We don't see him, really go through a ton. Like, of course there's emotions involved, but he moves on from it quickly. And I think it's because he keeps that to himself. He keeps it all inside for Nezuko. So my hypothesis is that no, he's not going to become vengeful and dark and just go at Muzan, which we'll talk about probably in a little while. But I do think that there's some realism behind maybe he is not the same.
Fair. I think you guys bring, I would say, itself varied perspectives on what could have happened here, right? Maybe have a hot take by saying this, but I think this is how it should have gone. I will say it flat out. I would have loved to have seen it go this way, realistically.
Whoa!
Bro, okay, so here's my thing, right? Like, I think while it's obviously a little bit of a hyperbole and it may have been overkill to maybe do it this way and write the story as to where, the protagonist has finally gotten away from its initial pain point, right? It's finally gotten to the point where he's like, all right, at least I am doing something about my problems. Bam. Again. And it's like another big thing for him. I feel like that could have been the breaking point of Tanjiro's character if maybe he had turned out not like Giyu 2.0, but more like Sanemi 2.0, just very angry consistently. And it can show, and I think the way it would have construed meaning to the audience of like, you can only stay pure for so long, like that is a large scale back out of what the show could have been.
I think that's really interesting to kind of bounce off on, because I agree with you, Hannah, on one of my favorite parts of the entire story is the connection between Tanjiro and Nezuko is something so special. I feel like you really don't get too much in the style of things that they do compared to other animes. But I agree with Brian in a sense of, if this were to happen, it happening in season 3, this kind of middle point in the story could make sense. And I feel like it pushes some sort of motivation, whether that's good or bad, we can decipher that, but it pushes some sort of motive within Tanjiro, and it would be really interesting to see him push forward to, I guess, defeat Muzan without her physically there. But at the same time, it begs the question, Nezuko, what is his life? How far can we go to really think that without it becoming distant from reality, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of thoughts that I have, and I'm trying to not just spew them at all times, but I don't know if he would necessarily become like a Sanemi, because I think that, first of all, Sanemi and Tanjiro are constantly kind of painted as, and I've said this, they're two halves of the same coin because their backgrounds are so incredibly similar. And Sanemi has, so far until now, kind of had the worst version of it, right? Because he had a family member turn into a demon, and then that family member killed the rest of his family, and then he had to kill that family member. While for Tanjiro, his family member that was turned into a demon by their attacker and is able to control themselves, and, he's able to live with that. But I say this again, Tanjiro would not be the same. I think a lot of this can also be up for interpretation when it comes to the anime original line that they added to this whole debacle that happened when Tanjiro says, the reason that I've come this far is to turn Nezuko back into a human or something like that. I think that line is kind of up for interpretation to the audience. And of course, there's also the side of what did he actually say? Because sometimes our translations in English are just not exactly the point of the line. But I kind of saw that as him just saying, what do I do? Some people say that as, would he quit the Demon Slayer Corps? Would he just become, absolutely socially recluse, doesn't talk to anyone? And some people saw that as just, his way of mourning. So I think like there's a lot to be like unpacked there if we wanted to, but I think he would stay a demon slayer because I think at the end of the day, while he wouldn't be different, he would still be able to hold on to the fact that Nezuko sacrificed herself to protect innocent lives. And if he were to either like quit being a demon slayer and just go off and do his own thing and never try and protect people again, he deep down would know that he's like dishonoring her wish. Or if he were to, a lot of people say he would just go like venge quest, run straight at Muzan and just die because he's not ready to take him on. I don't think he would do that either because I think Tanjiro at this point in the story is smart enough to know that he can't take on Muzan at this point. And I think he would, again, know that that wouldn't honor Nezuko's wish because he would just die trying to, fulfill revenge. So I think that he would still have some sense of that protection over innocent lives. So I think that he would still remain very, empathetic towards humans and protective of humans. Now, the way we know him today, up until really Hantengu, the way he killed Hantengu, he's a very empathetic killer. So, think about the Spider Mom, think about, most of these demons, especially in season 1, he feels bad for them. He doesn't hesitate, but he feels bad for them. I think that would absolutely be gone because at this point, he can now blame more than just Muzan on his family issues. It's just demons as a whole. And so I could see that change in him as a slayer. He would become much more sodomy in that way, but not with humans, if that makes sense. And feel free to interrupt me because I don't want to completely overtake this conversation since we're talking about my boy. And I love angst Tanjiro conversations. It is a problem. If I read fan fiction about Tanjiro, it is angsty. It's like him getting injured. It's him being sad. And I'm like, why? Why do I do this to myself? Anyway.
No, I think it would be cool to kind of see Tanjiro as, I guess, someone who's more veteran to the act of slaying demons and it doesn't mean as much anymore, and seeing that it's really only a desire of his own, not just releasing his soul. And I think that could be an interesting character shift for him. I wonder what physical effects would come with that, right? I wonder, because of the way he uses his intentions to fuel his breathing, would the choice be to animate his breathing style differently? I think that's something that's kind of interesting to think about, what would that have looked like?
What if his flames turned blue?
Right? That's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
Like Azula?
Yeah, like Azula, you think of, how, hers are blue because she's calm or whatever, but I also feel like it's fueled by her, inside anger, at, the world. That would be so, that's an interesting thing to think about.
As, when Brian was yeah, I kind of wish it happened, I'm not wishing that it happened, but hot take, if you say this, I would be completely okay if it did. Because I am someone that since I'm still so new to anime since 2022, what I am growing to learn is I am someone, just as an avid consumer of media, who really likes when, and I'm not saying Tanjiro isn't, but I love when the main characters are put through moments that really destroy reality, and especially this would have been the moment that literally would have just broken everything and anything, and that is, I think, the most fun part of it from a character standpoint, is because it's where does he go now? Because I think from the mangaka could have easily taken different pathways right after Swordsmith Village. This could have gone different ways, and we know the way it does, but I think Swordsmith Village ends in a way where it definitely is a moment where they can kind of pick up pieces, whatever that may be, and kind of situate the levels. And another thing that I was thinking of with demons and the trauma with the familial backgrounds with Hashira's and the other characters, we, 9 times out of 10, we see that in a flashback, and only a flashback, with these characters, and we as viewers need to learn to be on their side and trust them, because, we want to be on the Slayer's side. But again, if this happened in the moment, this would really be one of the very few times in the story thus far that you're seeing this familial attack in the moment, in the present day. And it would be interesting to see how those different roles would influence Tanjiro in the future. We already know Tanjiro and Zenitsu and Kanao are already so pivotal to him and Giyu as we speak, but it would be interesting to see their contrasting roles, knowing this information once he comes back to inform everyone of, what happened in this village.
I would say I agree. I would not like it if they had killed her off, but I would have understood if the story went that route. And there's other things that happen at the end of the story, which I won't deep dive into, just in case people are listening that haven't read the manga, that I feel the same way about. And I think I've talked about it with at least Brian. I'll tell Noah off camera, but there's certain things where it's like, I could see the story going that way. Would I be happy about it? No, but I also feel like it would have made sense, and it would have made for a very interesting and dark turn to the story, for sure.
I think it's the too much JJK and too much Chainsaw Man, too much of the Dark Trio. Brian, go watch some Spy Family. No, yeah. Seriously.
Which is probably going to turn dark at some point, let's be real.
Oh, no, what? Don't you dare do that to my Anya.
It's classified as a shonen, Brian. It's going to turn dark. I'm sorry, it just is. Anyway.
Also, quick shout out to JJK. If you're not reading the manga, I'm plugging so hard, but, dear God. I'm through the Shibuya arc, and I'm not okay. I'm into the calling games, if y'all know what that is. And, Hannah, if you thought you were confused before about the power system, I am blowing that face up when I get the chance to edit.
I don't know if I will understand.
Alright. Well, back to the correct show, if we will. Forgot. Let me put us back on track. Nonetheless, though, I do think, kind of agreeing with what Hannah said about, there are certain things in the end that, in the end, does it really matter? Yes, it does. And I think with the event that I know she's referring to, which she referenced, yeah, I think either way this goes, I think it is a really defining moment, but I do like the concept of seeing the impact it had on the supporting cast. So, kind of looking at the way that they did with Rengoku, right? Watching every character find out that Rengoku is passed, being able to then see everyone's reactions. I know that especially Muichiro, I think, probably would have been the most emotional. While I still stand Kanroji, I think Muichiro had finally, awakened his emotional sense at that time. And to have that taken away so quickly from you would have been something really devastating. Jenna, I'm sorry if I made you cry with that thought. I'm so sorry. Nonetheless, I do think it's a very interesting thing to peruse.
Yeah, I feel like it would have been, obviously Tanjiro wouldn't really be the same, but we also how would Zenitsu respond? You get back and you tell him that Nezuko is dead. It's kind of comedic the way he acts with her, but that could totally change his trajectory too because of the way he's been with Nezuko. But I like that you called out Muichiro because I think at the end of the day, this arc still ended with a very happy ending, right? Everyone survived. We had this brief moment of just utter despair, which was quickly replaced with happy tears and relief. But, if Muichiro, because Muichiro was watching this, he was there. He couldn't do anything. Well, he was unconscious, but kind of in and out. What if he witnessed it and he couldn't do anything? And so he just gained his ability to really feel and to really, understand the emotions of the people around him again, only to watch as this newfound friend dies in front of him, and then the other newfound friend deals with that. Ugh. Angst.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you guys talked about a lot with, how Tanjiro influences everyone in the story. He is such an impact on the entire supporting cast. But now, how you're saying with Zenitsu and Muichiro, how would this moment and Nezuko, because I do see her as a lead character as well, how would yeah, how would that impact the supporting cast? Like, how would they be influenced based on their ties that we have learned about so far? Would these characters' call to actions be quicker than how we see them in the manga or in the anime? Would there be different, I guess, like different mindsets, headspaces with the character dynamics? I get, like, will Muitro be a little different if this happens? Will Zenitsu be a little different? It's just a matter of, if it did. Nezuko makes a lasting impact, especially, and Giyu was really, the first Hashira to really witness that. And the Hashira are my favorite part of the story, so it would be really cool to see, I guess, each of their kind of calls to actions to the rest of the story, to see how, if Nezuko influenced them in some way, to see what she did to them in order to, like, increase their power or their kind of mindset through the story.
Yeah, I think, kind of looking at it holistically, when you take a look at the supporting cast, I think even from episode 1 of Swordsmith Village, like when Kanroji was like, I'm rooting for the Kamado siblings, and for the arc itself to have started at such highs, right? Because you had the Demon Slayer meeting, right, or the Demon meeting, excuse me, the Upper Moon meeting, and then you had this, like, awakening of Tanjiro. He enjoyed some great Costella, and he finally gets to the Swordsmith Village.
He never got to eat the Costella. He never got to eat it. It fell.
Oh, you're right. Rip. He never even got to eat.
He's like, thank you. Oh, it's on the bed now. He like can't do anything because he's like, anyway.
LOL.
He did just wake up from a
knocked it off. But yeah, looking at kind of like where the season started and then having it end on such a low note, I think it would have been good to see such a contrast in kind of the structure of the season, because when you look at it, right, I think it does follow almost like a little bit of a U curve where like pinnacles of events and like happiness of our characters kind of falls into a U, whereas like if you're starting down, it's going downhill, so you are like emotionally attached to this in the sense that like you're also like, wow, this is really sad. Like sometimes always ending on a happy note can be tough, but from what we know of the story, I do think that there are no happy notes left, if you will.
Yeah, I think not only kind of going back to like this influencing the people around too, like you said, I think we as viewers, and I'm trying to say this, I guess I'll put a little manga spoiler warning before I say this because it's like manga spoilers without context, so I'll just say, like, for the next 3 minutes, if you really don't want to know anything about the manga, we as viewers kind of need this happy ending. So if this arc didn't get a happy ending, which, like, I'm a sucker for angst, so, like, I'm not against it, you know? It would have definitely taken the entire story in a very different route. Like, just also going off the fact that, like, we know that we're heading into something big because Muzan has now put a target on Nezuko's back because she was able to conquer the sun, so we know the story's going in a route of, like, okay, Muzan's gonna make a move soon, you know? Not like with Tanjiro, where he's just been sending out pursuers against him because he's, like, scared of him. Like, he genuinely wants to kill her himself, right? But if she had died, then that whole thing would not have happened. He would still be stuck searching for the blue spider lilies, right? And so that would mean we'd have a lot more battling to come. And in that circumstance, you have not only all of, like, how would Shinobu react to that? You know, like, we've already kind of, explored her character a little bit and how her sister thought that they could be friends with demons and how she, you know, was entrusting that dream into Tanjiro and Nezuko. How would Giyu react? He's the one who met them the first time and decided to save her. How would Urokadaki react? But also, you add all that, how would Inosuke react? He likes her, like, not as a crush, but, like, he likes being around her, right? But also that, you also have to take into account how are all these characters going to react to how Tanjiro reacts to the situation, because he influences everyone himself more than Nezuko really does. So it would be like, honestly, in my opinion, to get him at least to some sense of normalcy where he can at least like go and take on missions, it would take a team effort, you know, to be there for him, to like help him grieve and get over this situation. And it could just cause for a lot more story, a lot more time with these characters, a lot more, maybe even development of the Hashira. And I'm not saying that I think that they don't get enough development. I like the way they're developed throughout the story, but it could have made for a much longer story with a lot more just intricate details that we don't end up really getting. And I'll say, end manga spoilers.
I think like what I really strive to like see in Demon Slayer or think about is like with what we have seen is, you know, which characters did we want to interact with each other? You're like, what are these interactions that we've never really seen on screen or in the manga that, you know, we would like to have? You know, this it would be like I would love to see the story be a little bit longer if this were to happen. I feel like the whole steps of grief for Tanjiro would really need to kind of be fleshed out in a way, and I feel like that could be told from a storytelling aspect really brilliantly, because it really can bring to light, you know, Tanjiro hopefully could take time to, if there is time to, you know, sit with these feelings, and maybe with him kind of sitting with these feelings, he may not be able to really fight again, like how you said, Hannah, like by himself, more of like the team effort. And I just really would love to see his headspace, like how we have seen his motivations and his fighting styles throughout these 3 seasons. Like how would they be different? You know, him releasing the breathing styles. Would he have more meaning towards it? Would it be a little bit weaker? Like, you know, what would it be?
Would we see more just the way he was against Hantengu at the end there? Like, would he just always be like that when he's fighting demons?
I would like to see somewhat like a fighting style shift if that were to happen. I would definitely expect the actual like style of his fighting to change. I think like right now, as like a swordsman himself, he's very fluid, he's very like strong, and he can be flexible yet agile, and he can still present strength. We've seen like his form change over time, right? We've seen the kind of the shift from the way that he moves with water to the way that he moves with his Hinokami breathing. So I think there's like a large difference already there. But even to season 3, our Swordsmith Village arc, where he's doing the Sun Halo Dragon Head dance, like it's animated so well to show that he is such a swift beast that I think it would change to when Nezuko dies, because of all that anger and rage he has pent up inside him. It looks a lot sharper. I think it would be shown more similar to Zenitsu's style, because at this point he no longer is doing it out of, or I mean he could no longer be doing it out of just like saving my sister, but finally getting the person who deserves their like peace in the world. I think the fighting style itself would be a little bit harder and a little bit sharper, because he would have less of that empathy behind each attack, or less of that like warm connection, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of see that when he's up against Hantengo. Even before he thinks that Nezuko is dead, he's kind of got, like, he's using Flash Dance, which is a mix of Thunderclap and Flash and one of the Hinokami Kagura moves. So it's like, okay. Which, by the way, Brian, when we recapped that episode, you called it Dancing Flash, and Emily and I made fun of you. We were like, that's not what it was. And then I rewatched it, and I was like, it was Flash Dance. Oh my gosh. Or Dancing Flash, or something like that. I was like, Brian was right!
I'm persecuted.
I'm so sorry, Brian. I would like to apologize.
I literally don't remember this at all, so.
We were literally making fun of you. You were like, Dancing Flash, and then I was like, And Emily goes, I think that's a, what did she say, like an 80s movie?
I mean, Flashdance is an 80s movie. That is correct.
Anyway, you know, we're already seeing, like, like him thinking Nezuko's dead. We're already seeing that anger come out in him. Like, he's already before this, kind of losing some of that empathy towards the demons, because like at this point he's done these battles, he's seen the just complete despair that they bring to humans over and over and over again, and he's just kind of had it. Would Nezuko dying be the straw that breaks the camel's back? And that empathy stays for humans, because I think like at the end of the day his natural disposition is still to be a kind person and to still be like empathetic towards people, and of course towards people that are going through what he's going through, he's still going to be kind to them. But that empathy that he feels towards demons, that's just going to be like completely gone, because he's going to be like, you were presented with a choice and you made the wrong choice, and now all of us are suffering because you can't make the right decision. Like that's what essentially would happen. So I think that his fighting style would definitely be much more like quick, because I think when he has that like rage and he loses that empathy, he gains a lot of speed and he gains a lot of power when he's in that state. So if you're talking like he's in that state constantly at this point, because he no longer has this big brotherly protection side to him, because that's gone, he like, could he be like become a total beast? I mean, he might still become a total beast. We won't get into that, but you know, it would just be like quicker, it would be stronger, it would be more explosive, and maybe blue flames. I'm just saying.
I feel like this like aesthetic of Tanjiro, I completely agree. Yeah, I think he would like lose that empathy where, you know, we were talking about with the Spider Mom and the other demons, how he really kind of took that time trying to give them a sense of light in their trauma that they have gone through. Do not want to see that if that were to happen, if Nezuko were to die, because again, what you said, it could be a complete change, but the themes of kindness and the kindness and love for others that he has, I still want to be present, and of course to really encapsulate the story by the end of it. But with those intricate moments, especially like mid fighting of what you know we know of him, that would be my most exciting thing to see, is what you and Brian said of his different fighting style. Like, will he be, let's say, as fast as Zenitsu to some degree, or will he kind of have the resilience of, you know, Rengoku fighting a freaking upper moon by himself? Not that he doesn't have that, but it would just, I think there would be a lot more reflection on his character, again, if this moment occurred.
Yeah, I don't think he'd become a completely different person. I think we would just see a darker side to him.
I would like to see Tanjiro drawn in the style of like Sonic Giyu. Like imagine Tanjiro redrawn through the lens of Sonic Giyu. I think that's what we would get. I think we would get like the mix of the two of them, because like, you know, Giyu is like the sad and depressed one, so like there's that part of Tanjiro, but then there's also the ragey part of Tanjiro. So I'm picturing like Scar right here, crazy eyes.
I was so
but,
confused
like,
where
hair.
you were going with that. I'm like, a ship? Like a romantic ship?
Yeah, Sonic Giyu Anjiro is what I'm going for now.
He's just like he becomes the captain of the Sonic Giyu ship, like
Too much One Piece.
Too much JJK. Too much everything.
oh Lord.
Oh my god. Honestly.
I feel like it all, and I'll try and kind of close up my thoughts here. I think it all really depends on because like I said earlier, people talk about this a lot, and there's people that think that like it would take time, but he would get right back to normal at some point, like, because it's Tanjiro, you know, he, like, we've seen inside his soul. Do I think that warmth and sunlight and whole feeling that was inside his soul, his spiritual core, I should say, change? I think so. I think there would be more darkness inside of it, but it all goes back to, like, whether Gotoge wrote Tanjiro to not really ever seem to really deal with the trauma that he's going through outside of select moments, just because they wanted to also bring that comedy aspect to the show, which meant they just kind of pushed that to the side, or if they meant to like show Tanjiro as someone who is just pushing that down and letting it kind of just stay within him because he has his sister that he has to protect, so he thinks he can't really like outwardly express like what he's going through because he has Nezuko. So it kind of depends on if like what route was Gotoge really going when they were writing that kind of aspect of him. And if it was just that he was keeping it inside, I do think that he would be very different. And I want to bring up, I don't know if people know like the words to Kamado Tanjiro no Uta, which of course is Kamado Tanjiro's song that was introduced in Hinokami. And it's pretty much just saying like, no matter how hard the blow is, no matter how much you suffer, you have something to protect. Move forward, move forward. And it's pretty much like just rewording of those few sentences a few different ways. And so it really, and along with like the themes of his song, like not the lyrics, but the way it sounds, going with the motif of Kamado Nezuko no Uta and how they kind of mix together, it just makes me really feel like you separate those two, you take her away from the equation, and Tanjiro really could become something different. To the point where, like I said, demons, he's just like a total, like, no empathy, just kills when needed, you know. But humans, he remains kind, he remains calm, he keeps that same energy, he puts a smile on his face, he wants to do what's right because he also can understand that was really Nezuko's wish. She gave herself up to protect innocent lives, and if he were to just kill Hantengu and protect just those, he would feel like he's not honoring that wish. So I think there's a lot to be said about that, but at the end of the day, I think that it would definitely bring up this emotional traumatic response that he's been keeping down for Nezuko because he no longer has a reason to really keep it down, and it would kind of explode in his face, it would explode in everyone else's faces, and that's why everyone would have to band together to get him to a point where he can actually like go on missions again and be able to like go slay demons and have a clear head and not just die the first mission he goes on because he's just too emotionally distraught.
I feel like you were going to culminate with that, with the whole, like, protection and the theme of that, because that, again, like, even though I did kind of agree with Brian of, I would be okay with this happening, I don't want Tanjiro to give up his mission to protect others. And I know that within just the writing of his character, I think no matter what traumatic instance that Tanjiro has went through, especially this will be the biggest moment, there would still be love at the end of the tunnel and hope, because I think at this point, and I'll culminate with this, as he is building these connections in a sense of a family, in a way, of these slayers. They're at this point where nearly everyone's respecting Tanjiro. Nearly everyone is getting to the same level as Tanjiro. We're seeing that with almost all the Hashiras. You know, at this point, we have yet to really see all of them fully fleshed out yet. But there's a lot of hope, and I feel like no matter if Nezuko died or not, the thing that would still be there is that support system. And really, it does not matter who kind of bites the dust or who doesn't, that group. I think what's most important is the motives that each character has, especially with fulfilling Tanjiro, and then Tanjiro then fulfilling himself to hopefully accept, you know, his mission to protect and just spread his love and compassion to everyone around him physically with.
Yeah, I think, kind of for my final thoughts, as Tanjiro goes through the rest of this story as written, he definitely still holds on to the feelings of anger that were initially started in season 1 and episode 1. But I think with the way that he would have continued with season 3 in changing our outcome here. I think it would have been maybe interesting to get an arc, kind of like Hannah mentioned, where he is lashing out at others and maybe he's like not being himself anymore. I think it kind of going back to kind of what I opened with, seeing our characters who usually are our pinnacles of, joy and, those idealistic characters that we've kind of talked about that aren't real. They're not perfect, but being able to relate to them just a little bit more, I think that's what makes characters more enticing to me. And so, not that I'm saying that Tanjiro is bad at all. He's like best boy and must be protected at all costs, don't get me wrong. But I do always enjoy when the story gets a little bit darker because it hits closer to home. And, that's what I think catches me. So seeing Tanjiro go this way still, even with Nezuko alive, I do think is important because I think this story overall as written is not just the story about Tanjiro. And I think this is something that we've kind of echoed throughout most of our episodes. But this story is mostly about the Kamado siblings. And I think it's just underscored by Tanjiro's story due to the lack of Nezuko's agency sometimes. But I think the story, with our Nezuko still being around, will change very much. And I hope they do give her a lot more anime original scenes, just because now she has the voice actor, freed up and ready to go without that muzzle. So, yokata ne.
Yokata ne. Oh my goodness. And one final thing. We all, as manga readers, of course, knew this was happening. We all were prepared for the emotions. But I want to take this as one more opportunity to say, UFO Table, what an amazing job they did. Because we saw a glimpse of what really Tanjiro could have been like if Nezuko had actually died, because they decided to really sit on this scene, where in the manga, I didn't have time to process what was happening before I had already found out that she was okay. It happened within a few pages. And in the anime, they really sat on this. They gave us those flashbacks. They gave us, just more time with him chasing him down, more time with him, going after him, to really give us a glimpse of, I think, what Tanjiro would be like if she had actually died with fighting demons. So we got a glimpse of what I think truly could have been reality, and I think that's really an interesting thing to think about, is that just could be his normal disposition after this with demons. But at the same time, would he lash out originally? Probably. They would take some time, but he would get to the point where he would be able to at least come back to at least a little bit of himself.
All right. Well, any final other thoughts, throw-ins, emotional outbursts before we head to our Taisho era secret? Well, all right. So, like I said, we do have a Taisho era secret this week, and now this one is a shout-out to my oral hygienist, Jerry. Thank you so much for a lovely conversation. I do always find conversations with dentists and oral hygienists weird, because they're trying to brush your teeth, but they're like, oh my god, let me tell you about my dog. It was run over by a car last week. And they're trying to give you their life story, and I'm like, I have things in my mouth. I can't respond to you. Do you want to finish the appointment, or do you want to have a conversation with me? Nonetheless, Jerry, thank you so much for giving me all of your opinions on anime. I definitely don't hate you, even though you said your least favorite character was Zenitsu. I won't hold on to it, don't worry. So, I hope you guys...
Oh, no.
Right?
That's a little...
He was like, Jerry, I'm not throwing shade at you at all. This was just hilarious. So I'm sitting there, and he's picking away at my teeth, whatever. And then all of a sudden, he's like, yeah, who's that blonde guy? And I was like, oh, Zenitsu, yeah. And he's like, yeah, he's my least favorite character. And I was like, he was just really annoying and loud. And I was like, oh, man. And I was like, he's like, oh, thank God you weren't super mad at me, though. And I was like, I'm not. I'm just giving you the business, as you will, as Linda Belcher would say. But, alright. That's all we've got for today. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want anything more like this, please let us know. are always listening to what you guys want to hear from us. So drop a comment on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, give us a follow on TikTok at Hashira Half Hour, as well as on Instagram, and on Twitter we're the at Hashira Half. And of course, don't forget to check out Noah's pages at Noah Glose across all of his platforms. Umai.
Umai!
Umai!